When you go to your parents and say, I've decided not to have children, or, I've decided not to get married, or I'm going to marry somebody from a completely different background. It's comparable to that, or perhaps worse than that, to tell your parents that I'm going to go enter politics as a woman. If you look at women running campaigns or being part of campaigns, even if they're not the candidate, 99.99% are men. It's not like women are any less equipped. It is just that men get that exposure over a period of time because patriarchy doesn't prevent them from getting the exposure. Yeah.
Tara is the co-founder of Shakti. Now, Shakti is a non-partisan women's collective that is passionate about female leaders in politics. Now, their long-term objective is to enable women to be elected as MLAs and MPs, more women to be elected from all sections of society. So they want to support women who are interested in political leadership or in furthering other women's political careers. Welcome to this chat with us. So the first question, I would like to ask you, how has women's involvement in politics at the absolute base level has changed over the past decade?
Women's involvement in politics can be sort of thought of or seen from a few different frames, right? One of the ways to look at it is to say, look at women in grassroots local politics, like at the city and at the rural village level politics, what we call panchayats and what we call corporations in India, municipal corporations in India. And then you can look at state level politics, like in the case of state assemblies, legislative assemblies. And you can look at women's representation in the parliament at the central level, both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. If you look at it through those frames, the percentage of women in terms of just numbers hasn't changed very much. It has grown. We have the most number of women in parliament ever, but it's still only 78 out of 543, which is very, very, very low, right? It's 14%. It's not even a fifth. It's not even a third. And you and I know what it is to walk into a class of, say, 100 men or 200 men. And there's very little that, of our voices that can be heard. So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is to look around us and see, are we seeing more women interested in this? Certainly in the last few years, there's been a huge number of young women who've come forward to take classes, participate in political protests, come forward to learn about political careers, try to throw their hat in the ring. There is much more awareness, much more participation of women around the political spectrum, even if not standing for elections, right? And that has certain barriers, like you must get an opportunity to stand for elections. There's money involved. So I think there is, the future looks great. The future is female.
So definitely the future is female. And you're true. There's more involvement of women in politics these days. And very recently, we in West Bengal that we have seen that now women have taken a stand.
West Bengal especially is, we should call out that Mamata Banerjee, twice in a row, she has given more than 40% tickets to women, fielded more than 40% women candidates, at a time that most parties don't even field 8 to 10% women. Any large national party or a state party doesn't field, maybe 9, 10% women. And she has, last two Lok Sabha elections, she has fielded over 33% women. So that tells you that, the party is actually investing in women leaders. Otherwise, they won't come up overnight. You may like them or not like them, that's a different matter. But democratic principles call for political equality, which means that women must have a seat at the decision-making table, must be able to influence policies, must be able to influence laws. And I think she is enabling that, as are a few others. Not enough, but it's a great start.
Politics is now mainly seen as a male domain, right? It's male dominated. So now making your space in this now highly male dominated sphere, what are the challenges that women face when they are in the public sphere?
When you go to your parents and say, I've decided not to have children, or, I've decided not to get married, or I'm going to marry somebody from a completely different background. It's comparable to that, or perhaps worse than that, to tell your parents that I'm going to go enter politics as a woman, right? Parents are shell shocked. Like you said, it's a male bastion. It's not just a male domain like, the army is a male domain, or, aviation is a male domain.
Yeah.
It's a male domain as it is dirty politics.
Dirty politics,
right?
yeah.
It's not only male, it's considered dirty in terms of being crude, in terms of being misogynistic, in terms of exploitation of women, right? Many of the women, young people joining parties will tell you that women are not treated very well in the party. So I think one of the biggest barriers is just the party ecosystem itself. In India, less than 1% of independent candidates win. So the notion that you can be an independent or you can just start your own party, those are very fanciful notions, and they're not very practical. They don't result in success 99.9% of the times, and literally so, right? Which means that you have to join a large party and learn to wade in that pool and, fight with the sharks in order to come up. And you are a minority, and, the system is not conducive to welcoming you. Or recently I was talking to some female politicians and asking them, when we join a company, you get an orientation. You get told, these are the possible career paths. If you do this, you can get to the next level. If you accomplish this, you can get to the next level. Every time you get a promotion, you are shown the path even further. These are paths with very clear deliverables that are given to you. There is no such thing in politics, but for both men and women. But the difference is that men are surrounded by a million role models. Yes. You can hang out with them. You can accompany them. Yeah. Meetings happen at 10 p.m. in the night. Rallies happen at, 10 p.m. in the night, right? People are sitting and talking and traveling without access to bathrooms, right? How do you have set up an entire ecosystem with the assumption that women have no role in it? You've set up an ecosystem of what time a rally happens, where it happens in an open ground with no access to bathrooms, going right through the night, and the way you travel and where you stay, right? Those kinds of things are set up with a base assumption that women have no part in it. And yet, we are half the country, half the voter population, and we have guaranteed political equality by the Constitution. So those are huge challenges. The other challenge is money is a big challenge. Indian elections have come to be dominated by money, and women of any religion, any caste, and any level of education are on average poorer than men because of the wage gap, and many women don't work. And even if they are very well-to-do and they have assets in their name, they don't have the agency to decide to spend it any which way they want. I can't wake up in the morning and saying, hey, I need to run in an election. I'm going to spend 15 lakhs of the money, right? Whereas it's much more possible that the males in the family have control over the decision-making, financial decision-making, even if the money belongs to the woman, right? So in summary, I think the social, economic, and political challenges, all three are of equal measure for women, right, when it comes to electoral politics. So in fact, that's one of the positive things that's happening is that there is a mushrooming of institutions that are trying to provide basic skills for women wanting to enter politics, including how do you do fundraising, right? How do you run a campaign? How do you mobilize volunteers? How do you figure out a campaign strategy? How do you know what your messaging needs to be? How do you communicate? How do you use social media? So these are all things. If you look at the percentage of women in social media, it's far less than men, right?
Yes.
If you look at women running campaigns or being part of campaigns, even if they're not the candidate, 99.99% are men. Recently, we had the Bihar state elections. We had, multiple parties who ran candidates. And there were at least a handful of large parties, 3 or 4 or 5 large parties who ended up, getting a share of the Legislative Assembly. In all of them, and in the over 100 rallies that all the parties put together did, there was only one woman who led the rallies, Smriti Irani, right? Other than her doing a couple of rallies, nobody else had any female leaders at all to speak on a stage. So from public speaking to fundraising, in fact, I've spoken to women candidates in the middle of an election who have said, oh, I didn't know I can raise money from the public. I thought we had to bring in our own money. right? So there is a lack of education and awareness, like you said. Many women, don't know the basics of finances, but many men also don't know. It's not like women are any less equipped. It is just that men get that exposure over a period of time because patriarchy doesn't prevent them from getting the exposure.
Yeah.
You hang out with other men, you see what's going on. You're the treasurer of the party. You walk into their offices. You see how the political business is transacted. An opportunity that is denied to women.
So they have someone to, in fact, even if they don't know anything, they have someone to handhold them and show them, say, hey, this is how it is done. But when it is assumed that women do not have a role, no,
exactly.
From the very beginning, they do not have a role. There's no point of handholding.
Correct. In fact, a lot of people say that before women enter politics, we need to have trainings for them and skill building and education. There is a little bit of a chicken and egg problem here, and I'll tell you what it is. Supposing the army of the country won't let women in, and you start building training institutions saying, I'm going to train women for the army. You're not going to find many takers because you need to have a job opportunity at the other end for aspirants at this end to aspire to it, right?
Yeah.
If you're not going to give me an opportunity and it's all men and it's barred for me and society doesn't sort of encourage it, then very few women will take it forward. That is one side. The other side of the equation is, if you look at 70 years of governance in India, we have fundamental problems like a huge section of population doesn't have water, doesn't have toilets, doesn't have drainage, doesn't have roads, doesn't have public transport. So the quality of governance, which is male dominated, right? For 70 years, this country has had over 90% male dominated governance. And yet we don't have our basic amenities. So the notion that men are already come equipped and it's the women that need the training is completely false. Because if they did come equipped, you would have at least some fundamental problems solved. Your public schools are in shambles. Your public hospitals are in shambles. The economy is in shambles. So give me a sector, right? And we can easily see around us that things aren't working. Yeah. So it is not to say that men are any better equipped. The thing is, they have much more the confidence that regardless of how poorly equipped they are, that they have a right to that space. Yes. You walk into a park, walk into any park in any city, you would see a man sitting on a park bench with both his hands outstretched, enjoying the sunlight. I challenge you to show me a woman like that, right? It is not that he has the confidence of the world, right? It is not that he's a superstar. It's not that he's the richest of people. He has the confidence that he has a right to be in that public space. Yes. He has a right to that park, right? So women don't have that confidence because we've been denied that right for so long, right? Second, of course, women are much more self-aware about what we don't know. And we don't jump in with our 2 feet when we don't know something. I'm not just joking. This is not a sort of a lighthearted statement. It's a very serious political studies have shown, especially in the US, that a man who's a school pass will feel comfortable to run for Senate or for Congress. Whereas a woman with a master's degree will say, do I know enough about governance? Do I know enough about politics to be able to contest? So women are much more aware of what they don't know, what they lack. Men are, have much more bravado around what they already bring to the table and much less aware of what they lack. So I think all of this put together, especially in a patriarchal society, make it difficult for women.
Now, how can greater women's participation in politics help in addressing women's issues? So these are very core, basic women's issues.
I actually don't think that there is anything specific called women's issues. And at the same time, I believe all issues are women's issues. When there is pollution, it's women's issues because it affects our lungs as much as anyone else's lungs. Yeah. It affects the unborn child, it affects children, affects seniors. So from pollution to the economy is very much a women's issue because they are the ones that are every day worrying about food for the family, transport for the family, education of the children. The family's responsibility falls on the women's head. Yeah. So water supply, it is because we don't have running water that so many women spend so many hours fetching water back and forth. So why is water supply not a women's issue? Women should get the responsibility to run the water supply for the state. because they are the ones fetching the water, right? Toilets, lack of toilets affects women the most. So, and as far as crimes against women go, violence against women, from domestic violence to sexual harassment, all of that is a law and order issue. So it is not just a crime against women. If the chap is capable of committing a crime, then he's a criminal, and it's a law and order issue. So as far as I'm concerned, all issues are women's issues. And like you asked, the benefit of having women's participation is that women's lived experiences are very different than men's lived experiences. You and I know what happens when we step out to go to a class and come back at 9 p.m. at night on the roads in India, right? We act very differently than a man out at 9 p.m. Depending on the road, depending on the city, depending on the situation, he may fear that, he may get robbed. But every single day, every single city, every single road, we are acutely aware of being alone on the road and how somebody might come and, touch our private parts or say something nasty to us or grab a handbag or just harass us for the fun of it.
Yeah.
So I think women's lived experiences are so different when they come in and bring those experiences as a fisherwoman, as a banker, as a lawyer, as a homemaker, as a parent, into lawmaking, into policy making. Laws and policies would look very, very different. And I say that with the confidence that when the GST was passed, the percentage of tax on sanitary napkins was at 16%, higher than Coke, higher than bangles, right? So clearly they did not get input from the right sources. When the lockdown happened, sanitary products were not on the essential items list, on the first list. They had to go through iterations before it got on the list. When the surrogacy laws are passed, women are not voting on them. Even when the criminalization of instant triple talaq was passed, Muslim women did not, were not in the room to talk about it, right? They are the primary sort of either victims or, benefactors from the law. The point is, whoever is the stakeholders, right? And they are not available. Women are often stakeholders in this, whether it's water supply or electricity. And our lived experiences are significantly different. And also, I think after millennia of male-oriented governance, not just as a democracy, before that we've had kingdoms, right? And it's always been men governing. I think a fresh pair of eyes, fresh people getting involved can really infuse some better outcomes into the governance.
So our last question will be, like, Shakti as an organization is rooting for more female representation in politics. And Engage is about creating safer public spaces. So what is the common meeting ground or common message that you want to put forward through this engagement?
The ultimate public space is politics, right? Because in a democracy, we elect people to represent us. So there is no definition of democracy without public representation. So politics is the ultimate public space, and it is like you yourself rightly said, it's a male domain. So it's an unconquered domain. We might have managed to we know that majority of farmers are women. We know that lots and lots of bankers and IT professionals and lawyers are women, right? But in the upper echelons of many, many professions, we haven't made it. But politics, even in the middle and the lower echelons, it still is a male bastion. And so I think the confluence of that is creating safe spaces for women in politics, so more women feel comfortable entering politics, being part of political parties, participating in campaigns, running electoral campaigns, and then feel comfortable standing for elections, right? Putting their name on the ballot. You get slandered and smeared, and they talk about how you look and what you wear, right? So it requires a lot of courage to be a big support system that they need in order to stand for elections as a woman. And then, of course, there is a whole gamut of policy making, which is obviously to do with the public and is a public space where women need to start to participate. So I think that's the confluence of what Engage does and what Shakti does.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Tara. It was lovely talking to you today.